So this is another opportunity that we're running simultaneously with our local CoC funding competition. And we're calling it our CoC Housing Specialist RFP. Next slide. So what is it? So the background of this opportunity is that last year, I guess, we applied for Tompkins Community Recovery Fund dollars with a big idea, right? We had a big idea about creating a network of housing specialists across agencies within our homeless response system that were sort of taking some of the burden of doing this housing navigation, housing specialist work that we're all sharing right now as a system, trying to take some of that burden off of everybody trying to do everything all at once and have these 3 specialists who are like super housing specialists and working together in a triad across our system. It was a big idea. We were funded partially, right? So then we had to make some decisions about how we were going to distribute the partial funding that we did receive across the continuum of care network of providers. And this is the first of 2 opportunities that are going to come through the continuum of care related to this funding. So all that to say, we have $72,000 available in one-time funding to hire and employ a housing specialist. There are kind of 2 models for positions that could be created for, using this funding. Next slide, please. They will all be serving people who are either experiencing literal homelessness or have recently exited from homelessness. So it's a little bit confusing. It's confusing in writing. It's confusing when I say it with words, but I do want to try to get across the point that there's actually 2. You would be applying for one of these 2 positions, right? Your version of these positions. So we've been calling one position Housing Specialist 1. And so this is a position that would be like laser focused on people who are in that literal homelessness category. So serving people who are living outdoors in a place not meant for human habitation, possibly in the shelter, but really with a high focus on unsheltered homelessness. We would anticipate that a project applying for this position would be offering some amount of intensive case management. We have an estimate of 10 people who have those severe service needs in that intensive case management sort of category for this person. And then act as kind of a mobile community resource. So when other providers are looking for housing navigation assistance with their clients who are experiencing literal homelessness, this would be a warm handoff from other providers. The person could be doing some amount of street outreach. At least 80 contacts should be with people who are experiencing 80 contacts in the year should be with people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, working explicitly on housing, right? So this is a position that's working explicitly on permanently housing people who are coming from unsheltered housing locations. It's not the same as some of our existing street outreach positions in that it's not as much focused on those meeting basic needs. Obviously, there's relationship building as part of this position, but it's not about, sleeping bags and filling out to get into shelter. This is really about like locating and securing housing, whatever that housing looks like for folks. Those expectations are sort of like our goals of what we would like to see, but I will say that we do want to see if people are considering this, applying for one of these 2 roles in our system, we would love to see what your agency thinks would be really great at it, as long as we are hoping to have it be sort of laser focused on housing and keeping it on serving people experiencing unsheltered homelessness for this one. The other thing that we're really going to be looking for in this process is openness and willingness to be part of a team. So right now we do have a housing specialist who's part of our team here at Human Services Coalition. That's Brett Irish. And there would be an expectation that whoever's working in this role would be working collaboratively with that housing specialist. And then if there's a possibility of another housing specialist being added to the system, that person as well. Next slide, please. Here's a position we're calling Housing Specialist 2. We're very creative with our naming here. So this is a position that's designed to work on that the transition between when somebody has exited that unsheltered homeless location into a permanent housing location. This is the position that if there was someone in that housing specialist 1 position, they would do a warm handoff to this position, right? So this position is designed to have that intensive case management for about 10 people, and their focus who have severe service needs, and their focus is on helping people maintain that housing basically as long as possible. We say at least 24 months. They should also be an accessible community resource, be available to work on housing needs for folks who have exited homelessness into housing in the past 6 months to a year, doing the same thing, making sure that those folks are comfortable with their housing, know their rights, know their responsibilities, know what to do if there's a problem, are communicating. There would also be a hope that somebody in this housing specialist 2 position would be developing and maintaining relationships with property managers and landlords, just in order to keep those lines of communication open and offer landlords who are working with people who are exiting homelessness a little additional, a line of communication, somebody to talk to if a problem does arise, to make sure that everything is handled appropriately. That is housing specialist 2. Next slide, please. Here's our timeline. We are here somewhere in between July 21st and August 21st. The application for this position is pretty simple. Simone's going to talk about the details in a second. It is also due on August 21st. We will notify it, and it will be reviewed and I guess ranked, although not quite as intensely as the ones we just discussed, by our rank and review committee, and projects will be notified of their acceptance or not September 12th. And then we do have a hope that by October 1st, this project can begin starting, whatever that looks like. If that means they already have someone on staff that they're empowering or giving this position to, or they have a hiring plan, we're going to try to get a contract going, get this position started by October 1st of this year. Next slide. Simone.
It's me again. Hi. So this is somewhat like buried in the housing specialist RFP. So just make sure that you scroll down where it says project description in that document that kind of lists a lot of the information that Lydia just gave. And you'll find the section that we will expect you to submit to us, but more specifically Lydia at lbarger@hsetc.org. But yes, this is essentially the application. So first, you're going to describe how you would utilize funding for 1 or more housing specialist positions. So either that housing specialist 1 or housing specialist 2, or maybe you're using match funding to do both. We're just going to leave that really up to you. But really just including your narrative, how your project is going to serve the priority populations described above. So really looking at that definition of homelessness, how are you going to serve that population? How you're going to support a trauma-informed housing first system throughout the community outside of your organization. So really getting at that collaboration throughout the community, collaboration with other housing specialists, collaboration with other organizations, because really we're trying to increase the capacity of our system overall by kind of having this centralized resource for providers, and also for that limited number of people receiving intensive case management to receive this housing support and navigation. How your position will meet the metrics described above. So kind of in those what we just showed on previous slides of, okay, 200 contacts and 80 of them will be this, and kind of letting us know how you plan on achieving those metrics. What does outreach look like? What does affirmative marketing to groups look like? And how you're going to connect with those clients. The timeline for implementation of the position and what impact you anticipate the position will have on ending homelessness in Tompkins County. That's ultimately our goal as a continuum of care, which was mentioned earlier in the presentation. But essentially, when we talk about ending homelessness, that means making experiences of homelessness rare, brief, and one time. So we would consider that ending homelessness. So kind of how do you think this position and its collaboration with the whole system will further our goal of making homelessness rare, brief, and one time in Tompkins County. And then finally, describe how your program will provide consistent and culturally competent help across intersectional identities. So as listed before, LGBTQIA+, youth, BIPOC, disabled people. So really thinking about trainings that you're going to provide for your staff, other considerations, other ways that your procedures and your policies are going to be able to just support folks across all of these identities, and what maybe collaborations you have with other organizations in our system that are doing really great work, how you're going to provide culturally competent resources to different groups of people. So that's kind of what we're going to want to see in that question there. Next is to describe the capacity and resources your agency has to implement these positions. We're going to help to support you, so you're not going to be, just kind of left to your own devices. The continuum of care offers trainings. We're the ones who kind of like designed the housing specialist positions to begin with. So we will definitely leverage a lot of our relationships in order to support you with this, but we do want to hear about what capacity and resources your agency will be bringing to this position. Discuss your organization's participation in the continuum of care. So this is an opportunity for active members of the continuum of care who are in good standing. If you don't know whether or not you are an active member who's in good standing, just reach out to myself or Liddy, and we can get back to you on that and what actions you would need to take, if any, to become an active member in good standing. And then how do you plan to evaluate the project? So how are you going to make sure this project is actually working? What are some of the data metrics you might be looking for to further that goal of ending homelessness? And then describe your organization's commitment to affirmatively furthering fair housing and racial equity in our community. So yes, what population does your organization currently serve? How is racial equity reflected in your organization's policies, procedures, and your personnel? Or how could it be, right? So if you're not quite there yet, then letting us know what is your plan for having that commitment to racial equity reflected across your organization. How do you plan on implementing racial equity in the design, outreach, and supervision of these roles? And then provide data or some other information to support your response. So say if you are an agency that is primarily serving BIPOC in our community and you want to use that information to show that you are advancing racial equity in our community abroad, can you provide some data to show that? And if you can't, do you have a plan for collecting that data in the future to show that? And then there's a budget section. So just providing a proposed budget and budget narrative for the project. And if applicable, outline how you're going to sustain this in these positions or these positions beyond the funding provided. So this is one-time funding. It's a limitation of the funding that we received, but this is kind of like where we're at. So we would love to see an organization really like committed to sustaining these positions, but just keeping in mind that this is one-time funding, and that is kind of a limitation of this RFP. And then finally, the evaluation factors. So this is a little bit less specific than our kind of big NOFO rubrics with the specific points. But basically, we're going to rate proposals based on these factors here. So that it meets the priorities that we set, that the implementation of this or these positions seems feasible, that the project as it's described seems appropriate for what our priorities are and what the description of this RFP is throughout the entirety of the document, some of the things that Lydia just mentioned, the impact on our community. So again, when we're talking about how is this going to for their goal of ending homelessness? How are you going to collaborate across our system? How are you going to help to build capacity for other providers in our system? We want to see that. The leverage of other funds. So if you are matching funds, or if you do have a plan for sustaining this position, aside from the one-time funding, then that's great, it's bonus. CoC membership. So obviously you do have to be a member in order to apply for this funding. So that is a consideration. And then also housing first, using a housing first approach, having trauma-informed care, and having culturally competent care as well. These are all going to be factors in our evaluation of the proposals and our eventual choosing of the person who will be approved to receive these funds. So that's it. Wow, so many words, but thank you so much.